Evening, everyone. Good to see some some old friends. Seen you before. Good to see you all. Glad you are here. So tonight we will start with a new topic. So our topic for this class is impermanence. It's one of my favorite topics, actually. For a number of years since I became a Buddhist, I avoided thinking about the meditations on death and impermanence. I avoided them. I just couldn't get myself to think about death. I couldn't get myself to do the meditations. Yeah, I was in full avoidance mode. And then I don't know exactly how my mind shifted, but I kept in the back of my mind a desire. Like, okay, I know I cannot sit down and do this meditation or think about this topic right now. It's very hard for me. My mind refuses to go there. But I kept in my mind this desire alive that, okay, but maybe sometime in the future I will. Maybe sometime in the future my mind will have a little bit of an opening, and then I can explore this topic. And several years went by. I mean, this was not like a month or two. This is like maybe 2 or 3 years down the line that I began to be more curious about this topic, and sort of consider that, okay, this is an important topic, and maybe I can just take a little step forward, yeah, in this flow, and connect with the teachings on death and impermanence. And once I did that, something amazing happened, because they became my favorite topic, and they became my favorite meditation. And it's really my go-to meditation when I'm feeling like, okay, I cannot at this moment deal with other topics. I always go back to the death and impermanence, and I get a lot of energy out of that. Yeah, the mind gets a lot of energy once we kind of realize what's our reality, where is it that we're standing. And when I'm stuck in my practice, yeah, when I just can't practice patience, or I have problems practicing some other aspect of the path, and I just go back to this meditation on impermanence and death, and it gets me out of the jam. It kind of really gets me unstuck. So I'm very glad that I get to sort of share this with you, and hopefully my enthusiasm for this topic will come through, and I can sort of pass some of that to you and sort of help you um, ease into this fundamental teaching. Okay, so with that as a kind of an introduction, let's do our usual beginning of the talk. So let's all sit in a comfortable position, relax, but not so relaxed that we're going to fall asleep. And let's start observing our breath. Okay, our inhalations, our exhalation. And let's help the mind settle down and help the body relax. And we remember that thoughts are like clouds in the sky, sensations, emotions that arise. They're just like passing clouds. If we don't hang on to them, they will go, they will vanish, and we'll be left with the peace. So let's try to do that. Let go of the thoughts, do not engage with them, do not involve ourselves with them or our sensations. Just let them go by. So let's now shift from our meditation to our motivation. And um, we try always at the beginning of any activity whether it's a spiritual activity or just our mundane, everyday sort of life-related actions. We try to frame them in a positive and an altruistic attitude. Yeah. And as we do that, we remember why it's important to do that. Yeah. And in Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist practice, and Buddhist thought, yeah, our motivation is pivotal because it's really that intention that sets the tone, that sort of determines what kind of result we're going to get from the action that we are doing, that we're embarking on. So there are various levels of motivation in Buddhism, yeah, and some motivations do not fall within the spiritual path. Like if we have a motivation that's purely for our mundane enjoyment, for our happiness of this life, if we harbor that kind of an intention that is only concerned with the happiness of this life, then according to Buddhism, that's not a spiritual motivation. Yeah, that's not a motivation that goes along with the path. The spiritual path in Buddhism really begins when we begin to worry and work towards the benefit of future lives, towards the happiness of future lives. Okay. So at the very basic level, we can say, or we can think that, okay, may this action result in a positive rebirth. May understanding this topic of impermanence and death help me create the causes for a fortunate rebirth. So then, if we start thinking that way, we're already just getting started on that first level of spiritual path. Okay. But that's not enough. Yeah. Of course, we need to have fortunate rebirths. We need to have happiness in future lives, so that we can practice. We can continue to practice the Dharma. It's very important. It's definitely nothing to ignore or pass over. Yeah, it's really something to work towards. Yeah, but in and of itself, it's not enough. So then we can move on to the next level of motivation, sort of like the middle stage, the middle scope. And we can think that with this action, we are going to learn and generate some understanding that would hopefully be the cause for attaining liberation from psychic existence. So, as we look at these two different types of motivation, the most basic one and this one, the middle scope one, we notice that we're still thinking about ourselves. This is still in the realm of me and my benefit. Yeah. So still the intention is very narrow. Yeah? Even though with this kind of motivation, we are on the spiritual path, these two motivations are considered very valid. Yeah. And definitely, to really engage with the higher path, we need both good rebirths and we need to be liberated from cyclic existence. There's no doubt about that. Yeah? But still, from the point of view of our potential. And that's still very narrow, because we have the potential to perfect all of our qualities, perfect them to their maximum um, uh, potential, yeah, to their maximum degree. Yes. And so with these two, we still fall short of that. So in order for us to really go for our maximum potential, we have to be thinking about becoming fully awakened. Yeah? But not just becoming fully awakened because we want to become Buddhas, but because that's the only way that we can benefit others. Yeah? That's the only way that we can benefit others. And here, with this kind of motivation, our scope is so much broader, because it includes every single sentient being, not just the one. Yeah. So when we look at these three levels of motivation, yeah, it's almost like we're going up a mountain. Yeah, we can remain at the valley where, there's flowers and there's lakes and things that we enjoy. We can avoid going up the mountain when it gets harder and harder. But really, the joy of getting to that top and to be able to see all around the entire landscape. And so that's, like attaining Buddhahood, when we are at the top and we can just have all that clear vision, that clear understanding of everything that's around us. Yeah, so that uh, uh, that's the real motivation to go for. The supreme motivation, yes, is to be able to benefit others, with the understanding that in order to really do that, we have to become Buddhas ourselves. So we're hoping that by engaging in this, listening to this topic, reflecting on this topic, and meditating on it, that we can develop, or we can create the causes to be able to become fully awakened being in order to benefit all. So let's sit with that for a bit and see how we can sort of make that motivation very real and genuine in our heart. Now we have set a positive and altruistic motivation. Let's visualize Buddha in the space in front of us, so that we can connect with the Buddha, with all the Buddhas around us, and also with the understanding that Buddha is inseparable from our spiritual guides. from our spiritual mentors. And of course, it's good to get in all the details, but in the beginning, that's not so easy to do. So whatever you can put in there in terms of detail is fine. And the most important thing is to just feel a connection, to feel that there is this very special being right there in front of you, radiating light, golden light, radiating compassion and wisdom and loving kindness. And we also can bring in all sentient beings and imagine that they're here all around you, extending throughout all of the big universe, all of them in human form. We connect with them because it is they who we want to benefit. We want to benefit each and every one of them, no matter what they're doing, what they have done, or what they will do. And so, with that visualization in mind, let's open our heart by reciting the refuge verse. Let's open our heart to the Buddha and to all sentient beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay, so let's feel that we are now connected to all Buddhas who are inseparable from our teachers and to all sentient beings. And then now we are under the guidance and protection of all the Buddhas. And we can also imagine we are now leading all sentient beings to full awakening. Okay, so the first teaching, that the Buddha gave after he attained enlightenment was a teaching on impermanence. He taught in Deer Park, and as part of his teaching on the four truths of the Aryas, or the Four Noble Truths, the topic of impermanence was included in the first truth, the first truth of suffering. And also his last teaching was also about impermanence. When he attained parinirvana. So, why is impermanence connected to suffering? Our minds project permanence. our minds have a very hard time with change. Yeah, very hard time with change. And we don't like it when things change. And when we encounter change in our life, which is just about every day, we get upset, right? Something broke that we liked. We lost something that we bought that was very dear to us. Someone in our family or in our circle of friends died. Our pet, our dog that we love so much, our cat. Those things cause us a lot of turmoil, a lot of sadness. We grieve our losses because we're not prepared for them. Because it's hard for us to contemplate that we are going to lose that which we cherish. And so, in that first description that Buddha gave about what is suffering, what is suffering? And the Buddha said, parting from that which we like is suffering. Encountering that which we don't like is suffering. And not getting what we want is suffering. Of course, he also mentioned grief, lamentation, sorrow, pain. Those are also suffering. But I want to highlight this particular one about, being separated from what we like. That is change. Yeah? Encountering what we don't like, that's another way of describing change. We go from a pleasant situation to an unpleasant situation. And in that change, we suffer. So impermanence is very much understanding impermanence is very much an antidote to these kinds of suffering, to the mind that wants to hold on to permanence and that therefore creates the conditions for us to suffer. And in particular, what can create greater suffering than our very own demise, our very own death? And there are different ways to relate to death in our society. Many different people relate to death in different ways. Some people may see it as escape. I want to escape from everything that's going on around me. I cannot deal with everything that's going around. So that's going on with me or in my life. And so I am going to I'm going to escape in this way. Some people fear it. And anything that there's so much attachment to this life, so much attachment to this body that anything that can be a threat to that becomes immediately a cause of fear. Yeah, becomes immediately something that we have aversion for. There are people, probably the majority of people, who ignore that, who don't want to even think about it. So we can have any of these attitudes, and sometimes we just have a mixture of all of them. Yeah, sometimes we can just have a mixture of those. Some people think, okay, there is nothing after death, and that's going to be my end. Why should I worry about anything? It's just that's where everything stops. And some people think, well, we're going to go to heaven. I don't want to go to hell. Yeah, I'm going to meet after death. I'm going to be meeting all kinds of my friends and all relatives who died. So there are just a number of ways to think about it. Yeah, but do we see it as a natural part of our experience? Do we relate to it as the most natural consequence of being born? And so our study of this topic should lead us to really see uh, death as a natural consequence of birth. Everything that's born will die. And we don't think that in most instances we don't think that death is the natural consequence of birth, or that birth is the cause of death. We have a number of causes. Oh, that person died of cancer, that person died of an accident, that person some kind of other terminal illness, a person had um, early demise, but we don't usually see that the real cause of death is birth. We also don't see that there are a number of causes and conditions required for us to continue to be alive. And that we are only alive because the causes and conditions for us to be alive exist. When those causes and conditions are exhausted, we will die. Yeah. So when we are exploring this topic, we're kind of becoming familiar with this very different way to relate to death, very different way to understand it and to use it, and to use that understanding for our spiritual growth. So then, in terms of our spiritual growth, where does impermanence fall in terms of the path to awakening? Yeah, where in that path uh, does this topic become important? So then, in order to kind of see where impermanence falls in terms of our practice, in terms of the path, in terms of generating all of the realizations that we need to generate, then we need to understand how the Buddha's teachings are structured. Kind of to understand how they were put together. So when the Buddha taught after his enlightenment, excuse me, when the Buddha taught after his enlightenment, yeah, he didn't have a syllabus, right? He didn't have some kind of schematic. He didn't have some kind of a lesson plan. It's kind of some things that teachers they prepare for the lesson plan. I have to touch these points, and I have to make sure they understand these concepts by the end of this lesson, and I'm going to give them this homework to do that sort of supports their learning of this lesson. That's not how the Buddha taught. Yeah. So it's not like he said, okay, well, in the first year, I'm going to talk about this basic level, and then on the second year, I'm going to get them to second grade. And then hopefully in 10 years, they'll be ready to get out of high school. That's kind of not how he did it. um, it was actually, I really admire the way that he did it, because the Buddha taught based on the needs of the group that he was addressing, those who were present. Buddha, of course, was fully omniscient, so Buddha could get in touch with knowing what they needed to know, knowing what their capacities were, knowing what they were inclined to accept, what they were ready to learn, where their mind was at that particular time, what's their level of spiritual development, and what kind of things I can give them that would just spur them on to the next level, that would just be like some kind of a push forward. And Buddha was so expert in terms of doing that many of his students, just by hearing him say a few words, would immediately develop, go up to the next level of development. They'll get realizations. Yeah. So that's why the Buddha is um, thought of as a doctor. Yeah, because he knew what to give the students at that moment, like the medicine to give them at that moment, that would then um, be healing to their mind, and that would allow them to grow in the direction that they needed to grow uh, for their next step. Yeah. So he gave appropriate teachings according to who was present, what they could accept, where they needed to go. Yeah. And so because of that, his his teachings did not follow a specific order. There wasn't a specific progression. There wasn't a specific order or structure. Buddha was really focused on treating everyone as a very individual patient, as a patient who came with some specific set of circumstances spiritually, and his goal was, I'm going to give this being the medicine that they need to get right now. Yeah. And so he gave this large body of teachings, like 45 years of teaching. And so from the point of view of what was then left, was a large body of teachings that for later, for those who came after the Buddha had died, yeah, it would be very difficult to wade through all that to kind of see, where do I start? And not only where do I start, but once I get started, what's my next step? What's the next topic that I need to go for? So mm, there there was some need to do some organization, yeah, of teachings for people like us who have trouble trying to discern. It's said that in the beginning, yeah, in the beginning of the Buddhist dispensation, beings had a lot less obscurations that we do now. They were like, they would just listen to the Buddha and get realizations. They were so special. Yes. And so it was easier. There was a lot less distractions then too. Yeah, their minds were sharper. But as time went by, we became duller. So many distractions, yeah. It's much more difficult for us to put it all together. 84,000 teachings, yes. And so this, after the Buddha died, his disciples started to try to uh, put them into writing, because the teachings were just oral teachings. It was very much an oral tradition. And the disciples of the Buddha were so sharp, they could just memorize what the Buddha was teaching. They knew by memory. Yes. And then at some point they gathered to sort of recite by memory what the Buddha had taught, and then put it into some form of writing. So this great work. I mean, I try to think about how many verses of teachings I've memorized, and it's just like a little grain of rice. And these masters of that time, they memorized so much. Yes, and could repeat it almost word by word. And even our Tibetan Buddhist teachers, they grew up with this tradition of memorizing. Yes, memorizing text. And when they quote text, they do it by memory. And it's like, wow, such capacity. Such capacity. One Lama, I don't remember who he was, but one Lama once said, you know, um, I have forgotten more text than you've ever memorized in your life. He told that to some young person. It's true. Yeah. So anyway, so the Buddha gave an enormous variety of teachings in this oral tradition that his disciples uh, memorized. Yeah, and those teachings spanned the the entirety of the scope of the Buddhist dispensation. The teachings, enormous variety. Um, so then, how did these teachings become organized? Of course, they first had to put them in writing. Yes. However, this structure that we are following, this structure of the lambrim or stages of the path, is a structure that is only found in Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's really unique, and it's very helpful. It has been very helpful for many beings to find the teachings in this way, sort of systematized in this way. Um, I know for me, I really treasure this way of presenting the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. And if you go to the Chinese, for example, tradition, they present them in a different way. If you go to the Japanese tradition, they present them in a different way. I mean, it's the same teachings, but the presentation changes, a bit. And if you go to, for example, the Theravada tradition, well, they present them differently. They really follow the sutras, and they study the sutras quite deeply. Yes, and the Lam Rim is extracted from the sutras, so it's not a different thing. It's just the way that it's organized is different. Yeah. So the teachings came to be in this way, in this structure, in the Tibetan tradition, because of the work of a great master called Atisha. Yeah, so Atisha took the Buddhist teachings to Tibet, and there he structured them. Okay, so I'm just gonna go a little bit about Atisha, because Atisha is a very important figure in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's a very important figure in terms of presenting the teachings in this way that we are learning. In this way of the graduated path. So Atisha was the son of a king of a area in India, which is now known as Bengal. Bengal. In that time, it was called Azora. Yes. So he was Bengali, and he began to study the Buddhist scriptures at a very young age. It is said that by the time that he was 15, he was already an expert in logic, and that he had won debates against some non-Buddhist scholars, and because of winning these debates, he became famous. His fame increased. Yeah. Also, when he was 21 years old, he was already an expert. It was believed to be already an expert in the sciences of the day, and so, for example, languages. So he said he was an expert in Sanskrit and other languages. He had mastered logic, as well as the medical science of the time. And the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings including, the different paths and the fruits of those paths. And it is also said that Atisha trained in both sutras and tantric systems. And that he was in a dream visited by a great master who granted him a lot of teachings and a high number of tantras. Yeah, he was a monastic. He took monastic precepts as an adult, and he really went deep in his studies of the three baskets, or the Tripitaka. I was very well versed in the different Buddhist philosophy schools of the time. So he was invited to go to Tibet at a particular time where Buddhism in Tibet needed a helping hand, because it had been damaged by a king. Yeah, it had been severely damaged by a king. And because the teachings have been suppressed, and they had been driven out of Tibet to the farthest reaches of Tibet. And so they saw the need to bring someone from India who was renowned and famous, and who could help them rekindle the Buddha's teachings in their purity, because the teachings had degenerated in Tibet. So Atisha came to Tibet with that goal in mind, to reinvigorate the teachings, to really spread the true teachings of the Buddha. And it is said that he was, when he was in Tibet, that he was quite able to eliminate misconceptions that existed about Buddhism. Which included animal sacrifice, and human sacrifice, apparently. And including losing ethical conduct for the monastic community. And so he says that he revitalized the monastic institution because of his teachings on ethical conduct. And so he became this very, very important figure in Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah. And so, not just that, but then Atisha worked to look at this vast collection of Buddha's teachings, and then arrange them in a structure, from the point of view of practice and according to different spiritual aspirations and inclinations of the disciples. So as to make it very easy for an individual like you and me to identify where to begin and to identify, okay, where am I on the path right now? What should I be practicing at this moment? What should I be practicing next? So all the way to attaining Buddhahood. So laying it out in a map, kind of like a roadmap, laying it out in such a way that, okay, we know where we're headed and on what kind of practices to engage in, meditations to engage in, to attain the fruits of the path. So he wrote this short text and comparatively short text, which he titled "A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment," and that's sort of the genre of the steps on the path, which became an integral part of the Tibetan tradition. And so Atisha's followers, sort of became or were the precursors of the Gelug tradition that was later founded by Lama Tsongkhapa. And so brings us then to Lama Tsongkhapa. So who was Lama Tsongkhapa? So Lama Tsongkhapa was really one of the most respected, revered, Tibetan masters, and a great commentator, disseminator, elucidator of these teachings on the steps of the path, the graduated path, that Atisha spearheaded. And so Lama Tsongkhapa wrote many texts, and some of them were based on these stages of the path. Some were shorter, some were longer. And so then we get works like The Foundation of All Good Qualities, which is a very condensed way of describing the steps on the path. And then we have the very extensive, great treatise on the steps of the path, which in English is 3 volumes, and which I really recommend. So there's a lot in there, and it really does take a practitioner from the very beginning of the path all the way to full awakening. So addressing in that trajectory, addressing what needs to be practiced for beings of the small capacity, what beings of the middle capacity need to practice, and then what the beings of the great capacity need to practice. So it's so much easier. Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa made it so much easier for us to sort of engage with the path through this work on the stages of the path, the graduated path to awakening. And so Lama Tsongkhapa had, throughout his spiritual life, had so many contributions, that we are still benefiting from so many years after. Yes. His work on combining tantric practices with ethical conduct, Yes, his analysis of dependent arising and the wisdom realizing emptiness. Yeah, his his um, his explanation of conventional and ultimate truth. And he did other things. For example, um, at that time, he also contributed to reinvigorating the monastic teachings, the Adya Vinaya, and ethical conduct within the monastic um, uh, communities. Yes, he and his disciples engaged in extensive teaching of the Vinaya. Um, they also engaged in extensive practices of purification, yeah, extensive meditation practices. So he was an all-around scholar, an all-around practitioner, and he helped restore the most important temple in Lhasa, and he also spearheaded the Monlam, or the festival of prayer that is still practiced in the Tibetan community to this day. So he's a very influential figure. And of course, the founder of the Gelug tradition, the tradition that His Holiness belongs to, and the tradition that the FPMT also follows. Yeah. Um, so we're still trying to sort of pin down where this teachings of impermanence and death fall within the scope of the stages of the path. So we're still heading there, but doing some background explanations so that we can get a little bit of a larger scope of how these teachings came to be, where they came from, who were the main figures responsible for structuring teachings in this way, and helping us receive them in this way. And so we're going to continue on that journey, getting closer to our goal of pinpointing where these teachings go, right? So we're headed there, just so you know, kind of can situate yourselves in where we are in the talk. So then, yeah, Atisha writes the lamp for the path to enlightenment, and provides a division of three scopes. Yeah, so he sets up the path in accordance to three scopes or three levels. Yes, according to the practitioners, from the point of view of the practitioners. Yeah. And talking about the motivation. What is their motivation? What's their intention? What do they hope to accomplish? Yes. So these three scopes are um, are determined by this the capacity of the various practitioners, right? So the small scope, yeah, so it starts with the small scope. So that's for the practitioner um, of the smallest capacity. Now, that doesn't mean, because it's the smallest capacity, it doesn't mean that's something that we can ignore, yeah, because we will see later that even what's considered the smallest capacity requires a lot of work. Okay, it requires a lot of work and a lot of study and a lot of reflection. So, yes, it may be said to be a small capacity, but that is not a reflection of what it takes to walk that path. Yes. So, for these practitioners, yes, what's important for them? So what's important for them is to have a fortunate rebirth. Yes. So, and it's for a person who says, well, I mean, it's a very practical way of thinking, really. Why? Because this person, these practitioners who fall into this smaller scope, okay, they say, you know what? This is all I can do right now. Yeah. Maybe this is all I can do right now. Seeing where I am at, seeing my circumstances, seeing where my mind is at, where maybe this is all I can do. So it's kind of a very practical approach, recognizing, okay, this is where I'm standing and this is what I can do, and I'm going to go for it. And all I can do right now is just to work for the benefit of, or the happiness of future lifetimes. So it's a very valid spiritual goal. We don't want to um undervalue that. Yes. But there is more to it that we can do, as I said, because we have all this potential. So, of course, from the point of view of the practitioners with a great capacity, this may seem like just a very narrow, very limited goal, right? Why does it seem like a limited goal? Because it's like it's akin to being in a prison and then just being concerned about maybe getting a better blanket or maybe getting a better lamplight, or maybe just redecorating your prison cell. Yeah, so to beings who have a little bit of a broader view, it is not enough to just stay within this narrower goal, because they see that, oh geez, I'm just trying to redecorate my life when I really trying to do what I really need to do is a major overhaul and get out of this prison altogether. Okay, which brings us to the beings of the middle scope. Yeah. And for them, okay, they recognize, okay, it's not enough. They recognize it's not enough to just have a fortunate rebirth. I need to have a fortunate rebirth so that I can practice, yes. And so therefore, it behooves me to engage in the practices of the small scope of that basic level. I better engage in those practices too, because I need a fortunate life, but that's not my only goal. I mean, I need a fortunate rebirth, but that's not my only goal. I'm not limited to that, because what I really realize that I need is to get out of prison altogether. I know what I'm here, I need to do certain things. Maybe I definitely need to have certain tools to get me to a fortunate rebirth so that I can have more time to practice. But my ultimate goal is I want to get out of here. Yeah. So um this is still, however, a very just an individual goal. This is just still a very narrow endeavor when we look at this goal from the perspective of someone of the greater capacity. Yes. Because someone from the greater capacity is thinking, oh geez, why would I want to get out of prison myself and leave everybody behind? It's like, all these beings have been so kind to me. Why would I just want to skedaddle and leave them behind? It's kind of a little selfish. That's just thinking about me. How about all the others? Don't they also want to be happy and get out of prison? Yeah, so from that perspective of the greater scope of the being with the greater capacity, they're thinking this is not just about me. I'm sorry, this is not just about me. I gotta be involved with everybody. I gotta make sure that everybody else gets out of Dodge, and everybody else attain their maximum potential, that they all can enjoy lasting happiness and complete freedom from suffering. Yes. But that person of the greater scope also realizes, gee, in order to get to that, I had to have a number of fortunate rebirths so I can practice. Not only that, but I need to be liberated from samsara, because if I'm not liberated, how am I going to guide somebody else to liberation? And even beyond that, if I don't become a Buddha myself, how can I guide others to that same goal? I couldn't. I wouldn't have the capacity to do that. So therefore, it's in my best interest to really do the whole shebang. From the smallest capacity to the middle capacity to the great capacity, all those practices, all those teachings, all those I have to master. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what a practitioner of the greater scope is thinking. And so from that perspective, then the other two levels seem very restrictive. Yeah. They're very unsatisfactory. So in his work, so Atisha is really looking at, okay, how do these three levels of beings, these three groups of beings with different capacities, how do they attain their respective goals? Okay. So we have to look at, okay, so what is the order? Yeah. So where in these three capacities is this teaching on impermanence? Does this teaching on impermanence belong? Yeah. Where does it fall? Where does it fit? Yeah. Of course, we know that regardless of where it fits, all three kinds of practitioners have to engage with this topic. They have to really get a very deep, thorough understanding of impermanence and death. All three of them have to, but where does it exactly fall in this structure? So the way that the teachings are organized, and this is evident when we start looking at the text, at the actual, particularly, if we could get our hands on Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, the treatise on the stages of the path. Yeah, then we can look at the outline. We can see it's a very detailed outline of all these steps along the way. Yeah. So where do we start? We start with the class that we just had not too long ago about how to find and how to relate to a spiritual guide. Because we have to find someone to lead us, someone to guide us, someone to teach us. Yeah, so it starts there. Yeah. And that's sort of like our our I would say our entry point. Yes. We need someone to sort of introduce us to the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. We already sort of looked at that with some detail. And then after we see those, we kind of see those teachings, and we engaged in that action of finding a teacher, then the next topic is how the precious human life, how rare it is, to have a human life, how precious it is to have a human life, how difficult it is to attain it, and for what purpose can it be used, right? What is how can we make our life meaningful? And also learning to recognize that we do have a precious human life. What are the 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses that come with a precious human rebirth? Because not every human rebirth is a precious human rebirth. We need to have these 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses in order to be able to say that we have a precious human rebirth. It's very specific. It's a very specific situation and very rare situation. And then after we learn all about this topic, yes, then we start thinking, no, now that I have this really good situation that's very rare, I've sort of found this treasure, sort of like won the lotto, won the lottery, won a lot of money in the lottery when I got myself a precious human life. So now how I use it? How do I use it? How do I not waste it? Especially in light of the fact that I can die at any moment. So here is where impermanence and death comes in. When we realize, oh gee, I have this great thing going. How do I not waste it? Because I can lose it at any moment. Yeah. Without any prior notice, I can just be gone. This life can end. My opportunity can end. And I don't know where I'm headed next. I could be headed to another fortunate rebirth. I could be headed to somewhere different. I may not have again this opportunity for a long, long time. So then when we bring in this topic of impermanent death, we really start to be more conscientious about how we're using our life. What do we need to do? We start paying attention. That we have some things we need to get done, and our time's ticking, tick tock, tick tock. Yeah, every second that passes is a second less that we have to live. Every day that passes by is a day less that we have to live. And there is and that meditation, the 9-point death meditation, which we're going to be getting very familiar with. Yeah. It's the meditation that really helped my mind turn. It's meditation that I really, really, really like doing. Okay. So, I'm almost at the end of class, and I don't know if I should go over this point or not. I'm going to stop here because I want us to do some reflection, and I also want to see if there are some questions. And so we only have like 15 more minutes, and I don't want to go into this other thing that's going to take us a bit longer. So, okay, so let's do some reflection for the next 10 minutes. And then after that, we'll have still some time for a couple of questions if there are any. But let's use about 10 minutes to take a look at, okay, there's a wonderful verse that comes from one of Lama Tsongkhapa's most famous works, The Foundation of All Good Qualities. And I want us to reflect on the first 2 lines of that verse, okay? And so the first 2 lines read, this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. So I'm going to repeat it. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. So let's hold that in our mind. Yeah? And let's think about 3 questions as we ponder these 2 lines of this verse, okay? Do we have a sense that our life is passing by quickly? Yeah? And what is our attitude towards our death and the death of those around us? Okay, so let's reflect on that for the next 10 minutes. Okay. So now that we've done the reflection, I wonder if there are any questions. Do we have time for a couple? If anybody has any. Scarlett?
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My question is, with regards to the lamb rim, I'm just starting to explore that. And is it something that I can do on my own, or do I need to find a teacher and have instructions given? Thank you.
Yes. So it's wonderful that you have the Lamb Rim and that you starting to read it. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, um, however, it's most beneficial if you could also receive teachings on the Lamb Rim. Yes. So the reading and the studying, yeah, go hand in hand with the receiving of the teachings because it's easy for us to misinterpret what's in the book, and it's easy for us to um, get confused. Yeah. And so we need a teacher to help us clarify what it is that we're reading, so that we can ask questions when we get stuck. If we get confused, someone can clarify. So it's we have to have the study, we have to have the listening to the teachings from uh, an expert, right? And we also then need to meditate on them, reflect and meditate. So that's the complete approach to Buddhism. So, yeah, so, and then from that study and listening and reflecting and meditating, then that really then begins to inform our practice. Yeah, so then we're doing the whole thing is engaging with the text, engaging with the teacher, engaging with reflection and meditation, and then transforming on that into practice, bringing that into practice. Yes. So it is said that every one of the Buddha's teachings is advice for practice, how to practice. So I think the answer to your question is yes. Yeah, that the teachings are best understood when we listen to an explanation from an expert.
What I'm wondering is, I have no access to a teacher. I don't have any access where I live to like a monastic community. And so, um, how do I go about doing this? Like, is there on the internet like teachings on the lamb rim? Is this something maybe Tutu Norling might be thinking of doing in the future, of like maybe having um us study the lamb rim? Because I just feel really stuck. Like there's no way I will have access anytime soon to a teacher. And I would really like to study the lamb rim, but yeah, I'm afraid that I could sway into misunderstanding.
Yeah. So this Discovering Buddhism course is based on the Lamb Rim. It's the Lamb Rim. Yeah. So um, these 12 modules, they really cover the fundamentals of the Lamb Rim. So you're getting that, right? And there
Okay.
be and there will be a number of people involved in covering the Lamb Rim. And Thubten brings in teachers that could be considered, spiritual guides, spiritual method. I'm not one of them. Yeah, I want to make that clear. I'm not one of them. But, definitely Thubten has a real commitment to making sure that, the Lamrim teachings are available, and to bringing teachers that can provide that. So, and I'm sure they have various levels of the teachings, right? So, T-Joy, would you like to comment more on that?
Yes, Farewell. I just want to raise my hand from the show.
I just wanted to comment. We have classes on the Lamrim year round. So you just have to keep an eye on our calendar. It's literally, yeah, there's a course going on right now. It's a little advanced, but anybody is welcome. And yeah, they're just year round. So you just got to keep an eye on the calendar. There's always something going on because it's kind of like the core. So sorry.
Yeah, and discovering
you all so
Buddhism
much.
is Lamrim. I just want everybody to understand discovering Buddhism is Lamrim. It's a very fundamental level of Lamrim. It's not so, but it is Lamrim. It's based on the Lamrim teachings. Now, I also want to stress that even though it's great to have virtual classes and like the ones that we're having, it's also indispensable to have in-person contact, especially once you've identified, just like we said during the last module, once you've identified a spiritual master, once you've investigated the spiritual masters, and you've decided that this is the person that you would like to have as your spiritual master, then it's important that you have in-person contact with that teacher. So I don't want you to go away thinking that that it's not necessary to have that in-person that in-person connection, because it's quite necessary to have that in-person connection. But it can happen at any time. Yes, and it takes time. It takes time to make that connection. And so while it needs to happen, also it doesn't need to be rushed. So that's kind of what I wanted to add. Somebody else had some comments, and I want to make sure that everybody's comments are heard on this topic. Is there any other comments? I read something about offer group over the readings on Fridays. So anyway, I know Thubten has, as was said before, a number of courses on the Lamrim. So is that clear, Scarlett? Did you get what you needed?
Yes, totally. Thank you and thank everyone. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so with one, we're over. Okay, we're over. So let's just dedicate. Let's do our dedication. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect, pure Losang Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise and grow. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. In the land circled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Shenrezi, tensing yet, so please remain until samsara ends. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losan, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, oh, I think there was one that we didn't do. Thank you. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, so thank you, everyone. And next Sunday, there will not be a class, as I will be in retreat, but we will continue the Monday after that, the 17th. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody.